Hello everybody, and today we are talking about Wind and Truth chapter 3 and 4. So if you're new here, then I'll have the playlist linked down below of all the reactions to the chapters that are revealed by Reactor magazine. If not, disclaimers, I will be of course spoiling Wind and Truth. I will be spoiling part of what came before in Stormlight Archive. I will be spoiling stuff that happened in the Cosmere before. So if you are not up to date and you don't want to be spoiled about any of those things, then definitely click off now. Final disclaimer, I'm not the encyclopedia of the Cosmere, so I will not be making the same sort of connections that the guys who are like all up to speed with every single theory out there will. I am just a casual reader of the Cosmere, and so yeah, we'll see. I will make stupid observations. You are free to correct me in the comments down below. So chapter 3 and 4, unlike what I predicted, they are not Dalinar focused, so yay for that. Because we don't have like the title pages, we actually don't know what type of perspectives to expect, because normally like every part of Stormlight Archive kind of has a page in which you get to see the names of the people whose perspective we will be reading from. So who knows, maybe Dalinar isn't even part of the perspectives that we are reading from, but chapter 5 potentially will be from the perspective of Dalinar, or 6, because the way we end chapter 4, we are about to go into a conversation with Dalinar. So I guess if we are going to get a Dalinar perspective soon, then it will be that chapter. But so, let's just go into it. So in chapter 3, we are reading from the perspective of Shallan, who has just had a conversation with Testament. And so we get a little bit of an explanation about like how the rearrangements of her personalities have kind of worked out. So how Vale, even though we had that whole resolution with Vale kind of being released, I guess, at the end of book 4, Vale is still part of Shallan, it's just like more of a supporting role, I guess. She's taking a little bit of a backseat is what the explanation is, whereas Radiant is still very much like an alternate persona that's at the front of Shallan, and that can kind of take over the way that Vale now no longer does, because Vale is now more sort of like integrated in who Shallan is. That's kind of the way that I understood that explanation for it. And then we kind of get the lead into what Shallan's focus is going to be throughout this book. And actually throughout this chapter I was wondering whether the champion might not turn out to be Adolin. I kind of don't know whether that is feasible because he is not a Radiant, and I still do not want Adolin to ever become a Radiant. So it can also not be like he becomes a Radiant and then he becomes a champion. So if Adolin becomes a champion, it should be that they choose to go with somebody who isn't a Radiant, which seems a little bit unlikely, but on the other hand, it would also be cool, you know, to have Adolin. Would definitely be a surprising choice. Adolin has definitely proved his worth, and maybe with the aid of Maya, who he's kind of semi-bonded to, he will be not like a Radiant, but potentially will be able to tap into the same sort of like power source to some extent. He'll have like a different way of using the powers because of the fact that Maya is, you know, like dead eyes. So it could be an interesting direction. It could be that Adolin turns out to be the champion because of the way that his bond with Maya works out, and he would then also be a new element and an unpredictable element, the way that I was saying last time that I think Shallan would be the unpredictable champion, and so a better champion than Dalinar would be, because we're still going with this whole sort of like Dalinar will be the champion sort of like phrasing, and the fact that it's repeated so many times needs to mean that it's not going to be Dalinar, you know. They're shoving, like Sanderson is really shoving it down our throats that Dalinar is expected to choose himself. So whenever like TV, media, books do this, at the end it turns out it's not that person. So it's not going to be Dalinar. And actually I think that Adolin would be as good of a choice as Shallan would be if he and Maya kind of develop some sort of a new bond throughout this book. But so Shallan's journey throughout this book is going to be to go to the spiritual realm, which we haven't seen so far, I think. And it's a realm that Patton describes it as being like a place where the past, the present, and the future kind of all come together. So I'm curious to see how that is going to be represented. You know, how are we going to see this in writing? What is this realm going to look like? What are we going to see there? It could be like very interesting and could give a lot of advantages, of course, to see glimpses of the future. Though it's that then we get to that whole sort of like time theory that happens with every type of book or movie or medium that mentions the idea of like that visits a future, that does any sort of time traveling, because then it's like the future that you're seeing, is that set in stone, or will your actions, because of having seen the future, impact the future outcome? Or is this the type of future where regardless of your actions that you take, you are still going to end up in this future? Or the actions that you take because you've seen that future actually result in that future becoming a reality, you know? These are the type of questions that I ask about this visit to the spiritual realm. But we're basically going to the spiritual realm because we need to find an unmade, I'm not going to repeat their name because their name is like it's something that I just cannot remember, Ba something, Ba something something, because this unmade has like a link to the bond between Spren and their bonded person, whether they be like human or Parshendi. And so I'm not, that part, let me be clear, I don't really fully understand the link of the unmade to this power and what they've so far been saying about it, but it also seems like they also don't fully understand it yet, and that's why they're going to look for her, because she will be able to answer some of their questions about the radiant link, which of course if you have a power like that, it's always important to fully understand it. And so I guess that is why we're going there. We're mainly going there because the Ghostbloods want to go there, and so we want to like prevent the Ghostbloods from getting this information by getting this information for ourselves, basically. But so that is a journey we're going to go on with Shallan apparently throughout this book, which could be interesting. As I said, that whole sort of it involves some sort of like time play, which I do really like in general. I'm just cautiously excited at this point in time, I guess, because I don't know how it's going to play out here. But I always do enjoy it when we have elements like that. So it'll be interesting to see what Sanderson is going to do with this type of elements. And then the second chapter, so chapter number 4, is a chapter from the perspective of Kaladin. Kaladin is going to meet up with Dalinar for sort of like last debriefing, basically to get his gemstones replenished, I think, to get his stormlight replenished. But you know, when he's going there, he's kind of blocked because, you know, Dalinar is still in the meeting, and basically Wit is outside Dalinar's office, and we have a typical Wit Kaladin interaction. I love Wit, and I love his interactions with Kaladin, and I love how we see Kaladin take on a little bit more of a playful side from time to time when he's around Wit, the same as we sometimes see like in the interactions between Kaladin and Adolin and Shallan, which I'm a little bit sad that we're not gonna get, because we had a few of those in, I think, book 2, maybe also book 2 and the beginning of book 3, I think, maybe even beginning of book 4. I think we mainly had them in book 2 and in the beginning of book 4, right? We had some interactions between those 3, and I really enjoy seeing them together. And based off of what the directions these characters are going into, we are not going to see them together unless maybe at the end of Wind and Truth. So I'm a little bit sad about that, because I really love that trio and seeing those interactions. But I am also very much looking forward to seeing Kaladin and Zets together and seeing what potential sort of like interactions we're getting between those two. But so Kaladin and Wits are together, and we have basically this sort of whole conversation about some of the morality that, you know, Sanderson likes to put in his works. And I enjoyed this section that was about like passion and the idea that, you know, there's this sort of religion within this world that if you have passion for something, so strong emotions can impact outcomes. So if you are just like wishing for something strongly enough, then the god of this world will make things happen. That's their beliefs. And so Kaladin is basically saying like, okay, what's wrong with that? And I do think that there is merit and there is some truth to the idea that if you are very passionate about something, then it's more likely to come true because you will be more likely to put the work in for it. But that's basically what Sanderson is saying, is that that sounds good in terms of the positive stories. It sounds good in terms of the stories who have had their wishes fulfilled, that it is because they wanted it so badly or because of how much heart and passion went into it. But at the same time, what you're also then saying is that somebody who didn't get there, somebody who for all of their life wanted to become a Radiant, let's say it like that, for example, and who didn't end up becoming one, does that mean that they didn't want it enough? That's basically what you're saying. If the positive side is saying like, yes, you need passion, and if only you put enough passion and work into it, you'll get there, you'll be rewarded by getting it. But it's also saying that if you don't get it, then that automatically means you didn't want it enough. Whereas what Whit is saying is that there are circumstances that keep people from reaching their goals, whether they be economic, social, or just plain bad luck. And so this religion of the passions is basically reducing these people to people who didn't want it enough. And if they would have only wanted it more, then they would have gotten it. So I did think that that was an interesting section, but it's also kind of linked to this idea of, you know, what it means to be a hero, and that real heroes, if they don't get the thing done, it doesn't make all the sacrifices that they've made for it worthless. Because these conversations happen quite a lot, because it's also a natural emotion, I guess. The sort of idea that, you know, you've put your heart and soul into things, you've worked really, really hard to achieve a certain goal, and at the end of the day, you don't get there. And then like a sort of immediate reaction that at least we see a lot in movies and stuff like that, but I think it's just an immediate reaction in life that people have, is this sort of idea like, what was it all worth it for? What was the point of all of these years of doing this and that if I didn't get to that end goal? And basically what Whit is saying is like, it's only real, all of this hard work, this dedication, this passion, this behavior that you're showing, it's only real if you can also deal with the disappointment of not reaching that goal. If you are somebody who is kind and hardworking and dedicated, and if these are the virtues that you're striving for, if you don't get the payout, then that doesn't make those virtues, then that doesn't make that attitude worthless. You know, it doesn't mean that all of your kindness, all of your hard work and your dedication has been for nothing. It is a goal in and of itself. And so I don't necessarily feel like I understand the point of putting this here in the story. I can agree with what Whit is saying there, but I also felt like this chapter to some extent came off a little bit like preachy and had a lot of that morality in it that typically we see more towards the end, I would say, as a sort of like conclusion of what the thematic for the whole book was about. And I'm a little bit curious with why it is here. It's also sort of like goodbye between Whit and Cal, because Whit doesn't really refer to it as like a goodbye forever, because it's like, yeah, you never know what's gonna happen, but it does seem like they're kind of saying goodbye to one another, and like Whit is very pessimistic at this point in time. And the more interesting like line in here for us as readers is Whit kind of feeling like there's something nagging at him, there's something telling him that things are not going according to plan, but he cannot really put his finger on it. And as readers of the previous books, we know what that is, because we know that at the end of book 4, Whit basically had a conversation with Odium in which he realized that the Odium's spren, I guess let's refer to it like that, has moved into a new body, and that, you know, that means that Odium is not predictable to Whit anymore because he has no experience with this Odium. We know that Odium now is in the body of Teravengean, and so Whit basically came to a similar realization. Probably not that it was Teravention, but just that Odium was no longer in the body of Race, and that meant that Odium was more of an unpredictable factor at this point in time. And so, but Odium then kind of took away some of Wit's memories. And we don't really know what memories it is that he took away, because clearly Wit is functioning on a normal level for Wit. But what are the things that he took away? Because Wit was very much panicking in the moment in which it was happening in book 4. So there must have been important memories that were stolen from him, but we don't know. And I don't know whether we will actually find out. I'm assuming we will at some point find out what the memories are that were taken away from him. But so it was interesting because it was just like this small line here to kind of like we had to be kind of on the lookout for it, for Wit to feel like something is going wrong, because we know something is very much going wrong, because Wit has always kind of been in the background, and Kaladin and Dalinar also referred to this. He's kind of been in the background steering things, because Kaladin is like puts this line to Dalinar of saying like, did you ever think that we were just going to be like doing basically Wit's commands? We would be basically at Wit's command, and Dalinar is kind of saying like, I think that we've been like unknowingly doing whatever Wit wanted us to do for a few years already at this point in time. And that is to some extent true. Wit has always been there in the background, kind of steering things in the direction that he wants to see things steered at. But if he is missing crucial memories, and if he's missing crucial information, which is that Odium isn't going to take the path and make the decisions that he expects him to make, because Odium is no longer exactly who he thinks Odium is, then that is going to be interesting in terms of it'll leave the players without a sort of like guiding hand. And even though they didn't know they had that guiding hand, it was still there to kind of steer them right. I do enjoy the fact that Wit is teaching Cal to play the flute. I actually kind of assumed that he knew how to play the flute. I didn't remember that he didn't actually know how to play the flute. And that it seems like we are steering the story in the direction of Kaladin having to form some sort of a deeper bond to the wind, which is a sort of like original old god on this planet. But so yeah, a lot more setup again. We'll see what ends up happening with all these little pieces that have been thrown our way. I definitely feel like we're still very much in the early setup stages of this story, and like none of the information we're getting so far is like really important. So we'll see whether by the end of like the first 10 chapters or so, we might get into more sort of like juicy things to discuss. But so yeah, that was my reaction to chapters 3 and 4. And let's see you guys in a week's time to talk about the next installments. But so yeah, let me know if you've read these chapters, what your thoughts were on them, and yeah, any theories you might have or any corrections you want to make on something I said in here. But so yeah, see you guys for the next one. Bye!